"Untie him now," commanded the farmer, saving the starving donkey before the auctioneer's hammer fell. The scorching afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty auction yard in Millerville, Texas, where a crowd had gathered for what promised to be the most controversial livestock sale in the county's history. Samuel McAllister, a weathered 62-year-old rancher with calloused hands and piercing blue eyes, stood at the back of the crowd, his jaw clenched as he watched the proceedings unfold before him. The auctioneer, a portly man named Harold Finnegan, was calling out bids with his usual theatrical flair. But today, something felt different. Something that made Samuel's stomach churn with unease. The animals being sold looked malnourished, their ribs showing through patchy coats, and their eyes held a haunting emptiness that spoke of months of neglect and abuse. Samuel had attended dozens of these auctions over the years, but never had he witnessed such blatant disregard for animal welfare. His attention was particularly drawn to a small gray donkey, no more than 3 years old, who stood trembling in the holding pen, his legs barely able to support his emaciated frame. The donkey's owner, a shifty-eyed man named Vernon Cross, stood nearby with his arms folded, seemingly indifferent to the suffering of his animals. Samuel knew Vernon by reputation, a man who had moved to the area 6 months ago, claiming to be starting a sustainable farm, but whose practices had raised eyebrows among the local farming community. The first hook came when the auctioneer announced that the next lot would be a special collection of exotic working animals that had been confiscated from an illegal operation. The crowd murmured with curiosity and concern as Harold explained that these animals had been rescued from what authorities suspected was a front for something much more sinister than simple animal neglect. Samuel felt his heart rate increase as he realized that the little gray donkey was part of this mysterious collection. The bidding began at $50, and Samuel watched in horror as potential buyers examined the animals like merchandise. Showing no concern for their obvious distress, a well-dressed woman from Dallas placed the first bid, followed by a man in an expensive suit who claimed to represent a private collector. Samuel's instincts told him that something was terribly wrong with this entire situation, and when he looked closer at Vernon Cross, he noticed the man was sweating profusely despite standing in the shade, constantly checking his phone and glancing nervously toward the parking lot. The second hook occurred when Samuel overheard a whispered conversation between two men standing near the auction ring. One mentioned something about the shipment from El Paso and how the boss won't be happy if we don't recover the packages. Samuel's blood ran cold as he began to piece together the possibility that these animals might have been used for smuggling operations along the Mexican border. As the bidding for the gray donkey reached $150, Samuel noticed that the animal was wearing an unusual collar, not a typical livestock collar, but something that looked almost like a GPS tracking device disguised as ordinary leather. His suspicions were confirmed when he saw Vernon Cross making frantic gestures to someone on his phone, clearly agitated that the donkey was about to be sold to someone outside his control. Samuel had served 2 tours in Afghanistan as a military veterinarian before returning home to run his family's ranch, and his experience had taught him to recognize the signs of animals being used for illegal transportation. The donkey's behavior, the sophisticated collar, Vernon's nervous demeanor, and the mysterious confiscation all pointed to something much larger than a simple case of animal abuse. When the bidding reached $200, Samuel made his decision. He raised his hand and called out $300. The crowd turned to look at him, surprised by the sudden jump in price. The well-dressed woman from Dallas shook her head and stepped back, unwilling to compete with such a significant bid. The man in the expensive suit hesitated for a moment, then placed a counter bid of $350. Samuel could see Vernon Cross whispering urgently into his phone, his face growing redder by the minute. The auctioneer called for any additional bids, his hammer raised and ready to fall. In that critical moment, Samuel noticed something that made his decision final. The donkey was looking directly at him with an intelligence and desperation that seemed almost human, as if the animal somehow understood that his life depended on the outcome of this auction. $400. Samuel shouted, his voice carrying across the yard with authority. The man in the suit shook his head and backed away, clearly unwilling to pay such a premium for what appeared to be a sick animal. Harold Finnegan called out, going once, going twice, ... and Samuel held his breath, praying that no one else would enter the bidding war. As the hammer was about to fall, Vernon Cross suddenly pushed through the crowd and shouted, "Wait, that animal is not for sale. There's been a mistake." The crowd erupted in confused murmurs as Harold looked bewildered, consulting his paperwork with obvious confusion. Samuel stepped forward, his military training kicking in, as he assessed the situation with tactical precision. "What kind of mistake?" he demanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. Vernon's explanation was full of contradictions and nervous stammering, claiming that the donkey had been accidentally included in the confiscated lot and should have been returned to him privately. Samuel's suspicions intensified when he noticed 2 men in dark suits approaching from the parking lot, walking with the purposeful stride of federal agents. the entire atmosphere of the auction suddenly shifted from routine commerce to something much more serious and potentially dangerous. Samuel realized that his simple act of compassion for a suffering animal had thrust him into the middle of what appeared to be an ongoing federal investigation. The tension in the auction yard reached a breaking point when one of the federal agents, a stern-faced woman in her 40s, approached the auction platform and flashed her badge. "This is Agent Rebecca Martinez with Immigration and Customs Enforcement," she announced loudly enough for the entire crowd to hear. "This auction is hereby suspended pending our investigation into suspected smuggling activities." The crowd began to disperse quickly, sensing that they had unwittingly become witnesses to something far more serious than a livestock sale. Vernon Cross attempted to slip away in the confusion, but Agent Martinez's partner, a tall man with graying temples, intercepted him before he could reach his truck. Samuel remained frozen in place, still focused on the little gray donkey who continued to watch him with those intelligent, pleading eyes. Agent Martinez approached Samuel directly, her expression serious but not unfriendly. "Sir, I need to ask you some questions about your interest in that particular animal," she said, nodding toward the donkey. Samuel explained his background as a military veterinarian and his growing suspicions about the animal's condition and unusual collar. As they spoke, Agent Martinez revealed that they had been tracking a sophisticated smuggling operation that used trained animals to transport high-value contraband across the border, and that Vernon Cross was a key suspect in their investigation. The revelation that the donkey had been trained as a drug mule shocked Samuel to his core. Agent Martinez explained that criminal organizations had begun using animals as an undetectable method of transportation, surgically implanting packages of drugs or other contraband into the animals' bodies, then retrieving them at predetermined locations. The GPS collar Samuel had noticed was indeed a tracking device, allowing the smugglers to monitor the animals' movements and ensure successful delivery of their illegal cargo. The little gray donkey, whose name was apparently Cisco, according to the paperwork, had been intercepted during a routine border patrol operation 3 weeks earlier. X-rays had revealed multiple packages surgically implanted in his abdomen, requiring immediate medical intervention to save his life. The packages had been successfully removed, but Cisco's recovery had been slow due to malnutrition and the trauma of multiple surgeries. Vernon Cross had been attempting to reclaim the animal, not out of concern for Cisco's welfare, but because he believed the drugs were still inside the donkey and represented thousands of dollars in lost merchandise. Samuel felt a wave of rage and disgust wash over him as he fully understood the extent of cruelty these criminals had inflicted on innocent animals for their financial gain. Agent Martinez asked Samuel if he would be willing to provide temporary care for Cisco while the investigation continued, explaining that the animal needed specialized veterinary attention and a safe environment away from the criminal network that had abused him. Samuel agreed without hesitation, recognizing that his military veterinary training made him uniquely qualified to help Cisco recover from his ordeal. As they prepared to transport the donkey to Samuel's ranch, Agent Martinez revealed another shocking detail. This wasn't an isolated case, but part of a larger network that had been operating for over 2 years, using dozens of animals to smuggle everything from drugs to stolen artifacts across the border. The investigation had international implications, with connections to cartels in Mexico and buyers as far away as Europe and Asia. Samuel's simple act of compassion at a local auction had inadvertently helped federal agents close a significant gap in their investigation. As they loaded Cisco into Samuel's trailer, the donkey seemed to sense that he was finally safe, his frightened demeanor beginning to give way to cautious hope. The drive back to Samuel's ranch was quiet except for the gentle sounds of Cisco settling into the clean straw bedding, perhaps the first comfortable rest he had experienced in months. Over the following weeks, Samuel worked tirelessly to nurse Cisco back to health, providing the specialized care and attention the donkey desperately needed. The surgical scars on Cisco's abdomen were healing well, but the psychological trauma would take much longer to overcome. Samuel's wife, Margaret, a retired schoolteacher with infinite patience and a natural way with animals, took an immediate liking to Cisco and spent hours each day simply sitting with him, helping him learn to trust humans again. Their ranch, nestled in the rolling hills outside Millerville, provided the perfect environment for Cisco's recovery, peaceful, secure, and surrounded by other well-cared-for animals who served as positive examples of what life should be like for creatures under human care. Samuel's 2 adult children, Emily and Jake, both visited regularly and were amazed by their father's dedication to helping this one small donkey who had suffered so much. Emily, a veterinary student at Texas A&M University, was particularly interested in Cisco's case and spent her spring break helping with his rehabilitation, learning valuable lessons about animal psychology and the resilience of creatures who have survived trauma. Jake, a high school history teacher, was fascinated by the broader implications of the smuggling operation and began researching similar cases for a documentary project he was considering. The breakthrough in Cisco's recovery came on a warm April morning when Margaret was sitting in the pasture reading a book, with Cisco grazing nearby. For the first time since his arrival at the ranch, Cisco approached Margaret voluntarily and gently nuzzled her shoulder, a simple gesture that brought tears to her eyes. Samuel witnessed this moment from the barn and felt a profound sense of satisfaction, knowing that Cisco was finally beginning to heal from the trauma he had endured. Agent Martinez visited regularly to check on Cisco's progress and update Samuel on the ongoing investigation. The case had expanded dramatically, with arrests being made in 3 states and evidence pointing to a smuggling network worth millions of dollars. Vernon Cross had been charged with multiple federal crimes and was cooperating with authorities in exchange for a reduced sentence, providing information about the network's operations and helping identify other animals that had been used in similar schemes. The investigation had already led to the rescue of dozens of other animals, including dogs, cats, and even exotic birds that had been surgically implanted with contraband and transported across international borders. Samuel was amazed to learn that his decision to bid on one small donkey had helped expose such a vast criminal enterprise and potentially saved countless other animals from similar abuse. As summer approached, Cisco had gained 30 pounds, and his coat had regained its natural luster, transforming him from the emaciated, frightened creature Samuel had first seen at the auction into a healthy, spirited young donkey with a playful personality. The most remarkable change was in his eyes, which now sparkled with curiosity and mischief instead of the haunted emptiness that had initially broken Samuel's heart. Cisco had formed strong bonds with the other animals on the ranch, particularly an old quarter horse named Thunder, who seemed to understand Cisco's need for gentle companionship and protection. Margaret had begun training Cisco to serve as a therapy animal, recognizing his natural empathy and calm demeanor as qualities that could help other trauma survivors. Local veterans organizations had expressed interest in working with Cisco, believing that his story of survival and recovery could provide inspiration and comfort to soldiers dealing with their own psychological wounds. Samuel was proud to see how Cisco was not only healing from his own trauma, but preparing to help others overcome theirs as well. The transformation was so complete that visitors to the ranch could hardly believe that this healthy, stampy donkey was the same animal who had been near death just months earlier. The legal proceedings against the smuggling network continued throughout the summer, with Samuel providing testimony about Cisco's condition and the circumstances of the auction. The case had attracted national attention, with news outlets reporting on the innovative methods criminals were using to exploit animals for illegal purposes. Samuel found himself reluctantly in the spotlight, giving interviews to reporters and speaking at conferences about animal welfare and border security. He was uncomfortable with the attention, but recognized the importance of raising awareness about this form of animal abuse. Agent Martinez had become a close friend of the family, often stopping by for dinner and updates on Cisco's progress. She revealed that the investigation had international ramifications, with similar operations being discovered in Europe and Asia, suggesting that the use of animals for smuggling was becoming a global problem requiring coordinated, international response. The arrest of Vernon Cross and his associates had disrupted the network significantly, but authorities knew that other groups would likely attempt to fill the void left by their removal. Samuel's ranch had become an unofficial headquarters for planning animal rescue operations, with agents and veterinarians consulting with him about best practices for rehabilitating animals who had been used in criminal enterprises. The most surprising development came in late August when Agent Martinez arrived at the ranch with unexpected news. The original owners of Cisco had been located. The donkey had been stolen from a small family farm in New Mexico 18 months earlier, part of a theft ring that targeted animals suitable for conversion into drug mules. The family, the Gonzalez family, had reported Cisco missing but had little hope of ever seeing him again. Maria Gonzalez, a widow with 3 young children, had raised Cisco from birth and considered him part of the family rather than simply livestock. The children, aged 8, 10, and 12, had been devastated by Cisco's disappearance and had never stopped hoping for his return. Agent Martinez explained that while the Gonzalez family had every legal right to reclaim Cisco, they were also aware of the extensive medical treatment and rehabilitation he had received at Samuel's ranch. The situation presented a difficult emotional and legal dilemma that would require careful consideration of what was truly best for Cisco's well-being. Samuel's heart was heavy as he realized that the donkey he had grown to love might soon be leaving the ranch, where he had found healing and safety. The meeting between the McAllister and Gonzalez families was arranged for a sunny September morning at Samuel's ranch. Maria Gonzalez arrived with her 3 children, Carmen, Diego, and little Sofia, all of whom were nervous but excited about the possibility of reuniting with their beloved Cisco. Samuel and Margaret had prepared carefully for this meeting, knowing that it would be emotionally difficult for everyone involved. When Cisco saw Maria approaching, his reaction was immediate and unmistakable. His ears perked up, he began braying excitedly, and he trotted directly to her. nuzzling her hands and face with obvious recognition and joy. The children began crying with happiness as they hugged their long-lost friend, and even Samuel had to wipe away tears as he witnessed the powerful reunion. Maria spoke broken English, but her gratitude toward Samuel and Margaret was clear and heartfelt as she thanked them repeatedly for saving Cisco's life and nursing him back to health. The children chattered excitedly in Spanish and English, telling Cisco about everything that had happened during his absence and promising never to let him out of their sight again. Samuel realized in that moment that despite his deep attachment to Cisco, the donkey clearly belonged with the Gonzalez family who had loved him since birth. However, the practical challenges of Cisco's return to his original family were more complex than anyone had anticipated. The Gonzalez farm had suffered financial difficulties during the 18 months since Cisco's disappearance, and Maria was struggling to provide adequate care for her remaining animals. The veterinary bills associated with Cisco's ongoing medical needs would be beyond her means, and the family's small farm lacked the security measures necessary to protect him from potential retaliation by criminal elements still at large. Samuel and Margaret spent long hours discussing the situation with Agent Martinez and representatives from various animal welfare organizations, searching for a solution that would serve everyone's best interests. The breakthrough came when Emily, Samuel's daughter, suggested a co-ownership arrangement that would allow Cisco to remain at the McAllister Ranch while giving the Gonzalez family unlimited visitation rights and partial ownership. This arrangement would ensure that Cisco continued to receive the medical care he needed while allowing him to maintain his emotional connection to his original family. Maria was initially hesitant to accept what she perceived as charity, but Samuel assured her that the arrangement would be mutually beneficial, with Cisco serving as a therapy animal whose work would honor both families' commitment to his well-being. Legal formalization of the co-ownership arrangement took several weeks to complete, involving lawyers, animal welfare organizations, and federal agents who wanted to ensure that Cisco would remain safe from any future criminal targeting. During this time, the Gonzalez children visited the ranch every weekend, helping with Cisco's care and learning about animal rehabilitation from Samuel and Margaret. Carmen, the oldest child, showed particular interest in veterinary medicine and began shadowing Emily during her visits home from college. Diego proved to have a natural talent for animal training and worked with Margaret to advance Cisco's therapy animal certification. Little Sophia simply enjoyed spending time with Cisco, reading him stories and brushing his coat until it gleamed. In the sunlight, Samuel was amazed by how quickly the two families bonded over their shared love for Cisco and their commitment to his continued recovery. The arrangement had created an extended family structure that provided emotional support for everyone involved, proving that sometimes the most unexpected circumstances can lead to the most meaningful relationships. The official ceremony to formalize Cisco's co-ownership took place on a crisp October morning, with representatives from various agencies and organizations attending to witness the historic agreement. Agent Martinez served as the master of ceremonies, explaining how Cisco's story had become a symbol of hope for animals who had survived criminal abuse and a model for innovative solutions to complex custody situations. Local news crews covered the event, and Samuel was surprised by the number of people who had followed Cisco's story and wanted to celebrate his recovery. The ceremony included the presentation of Cisco's official therapy animal certification, making him the first donkey in Texas to achieve this designation. Maria Gonzalez spoke movingly about the kindness of strangers who had saved her beloved animal and become treasured friends in the process. Samuel's speech focused on the lessons he had learned about compassion, justice, and the unexpected ways that one small act of kindness can create ripple effects that change many lives. As the ceremony concluded, Cisco stood peacefully between the two families who loved him, seemingly aware that he was the center of attention and enjoying every moment of it. The winter months brought new challenges and opportunities as Cisco began his work as a certified therapy animal. His first assignment was at a local veterans hospital, where his gentle demeanor and remarkable story provided comfort and inspiration to soldiers struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder. Samuel accompanied Cisco on these visits, sharing his own experiences as a military veterinarian and helping veterans understand how caring for animals could aid in their own healing process. Margaret coordinated visits to schools, where Cisco's story taught children about empathy, resilience, and the importance of standing up for those who cannot protect themselves. The Gonzalez children became junior ambassadors for Cisco's therapy work, helping to translate for Spanish-speaking visitors and sharing their perspective on his journey from victim to healer. Agent Martinez continued to use Cisco's case as a teaching tool for other agents and officers, demonstrating how thorough investigation and community cooperation could transform a simple animal abuse case into a comprehensive takedown of a criminal network. The case had become a model for how law enforcement, veterinarians, and animal welfare organizations could work together to combat emerging forms of animal exploitation. As spring returned to the Texas Hill Country, Samuel reflected on the year that had passed since that fateful auction in Millerville. What had begun as a simple act of compassion for a suffering animal had evolved into a complex story involving international crime, federal investigations, family reunification, and innovative solutions to custody disputes. Cisco had not only recovered completely from his physical and psychological trauma, but had become a symbol of hope and healing for countless others who had survived their own forms of abuse and neglect. The bond between the McAllister and Gonzalez families had grown stronger with each passing month, creating a support network that extended far beyond their shared love for one small donkey. Samuel's ranch had become an unofficial center for animal rehabilitation research, with veterinary students and animal behaviorists visiting regularly to study Cisco's recovery and learn about best practices for treating trauma in rescued animals. The case had also led to significant changes in federal law enforcement protocols for handling animal smuggling cases, with new guidelines requiring specialized veterinary care and psychological evaluation for rescued animals. The anniversary of Cisco's rescue was marked by a celebration that brought together everyone who had played a role in his remarkable journey. Federal agents, veterinarians, lawyers, journalists, and dozens of community members gathered at Samuel's ranch to honor not just Cisco's recovery but the collaborative effort that had made it possible. Agent Martinez announced that the smuggling network responsible for Cisco's abuse had been completely dismantled, with convictions obtained against all major participants and new security measures implemented at border crossings to prevent similar operations. Maria Gonzalez presented Samuel and Margaret with a handmade quilt depicting Cisco's story, created by women in her community as a token of gratitude for their kindness and generosity. The Gonzalez children had prepared a presentation about their experiences over the past year, describing how Cisco's return had brought their family closer together and inspired them to pursue careers in animal welfare and veterinary medicine. As the sun set over the Texas hills, Cisco grazed peacefully in the pasture surrounded by both of his families, seemingly content in the knowledge that he was loved, safe, and making a difference in the world through his work as a therapy animal and symbol of hope for others who had survived trauma and abuse. The command, "Untie him now," had saved more than just one starving donkey that day in Millerville. It had sparked a chain of events that exposed a criminal network, brought two families together, changed federal law enforcement protocols, and created a model for animal rehabilitation that would benefit countless creatures for years to come. Samuel McAllister's decision to intervene at that auction had been driven by simple compassion, but its effects had rippled outward in ways he could never have imagined. As he watched Cisco playing with the other animals in the fading light, Samuel understood that sometimes the most profound acts of courage begin with the simplest recognition that suffering should not be ignored and that every living creature deserves protection, dignity, and the chance to heal from whatever harm they have endured.